Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we're talking about the 2028 presidential election and specifically looking at the state of New Hampshire, where local news station WMUR's political director Adam Sexton has released some screenshots of a new poll released from St. Anselm College of a new poll of the 2028 race. And it shows that Democrat Pete Buttigieg is tied with California Governor Gavin Newsom at 23% to 23% in the New Hampshire primary for 2028, with J.B. Pritzker finishing in third at 9%. Sexton also opposed other candidates as well, potentially with Bernie Sanders getting 4%, Amy Klobuchar getting 3%, Josh Shapiro getting 3%, Gretchen Whitmer getting 2%, and another candidate getting 3%. There is also, I believe, I did skip the second slide because I did not expand it, but the second slide showed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at 7%, Kamala Harris at 6%, and Cory Booker at 5%. So this is obviously very big news, as New Hampshire is historically one of the earliest states to hold its presidential primaries. New Hampshire's had a history of being the first presidential primary for the presidential elections. Now for 2024, that did change after Joe Biden and many of his closest allies moved it away from New Hampshire to, I believe, South Carolina, a state Joe Biden won in the Democratic primary in 2020. It's still very much up in the air for what's going to happen for 2028. If the Democrats move it to being New Hampshire again. But whether it is or not on the Democratic side, New Hampshire plays a very important role in the 2028 Democratic presidential primary, and historically is known as a state that essentially picks presidents in terms of primaries like this one. And with Buttigieg and Newsom tied at 23-23, it shows what's starting to become very apparent from the 2028 presidential polling, which is this is going to become a very tight race on the Democratic side, a very competitive one which Gavin Newsom is quickly gaining in a lot frequently now. The New Hampshire polling by St. Anselm right now, this is the only poll taken for New Hampshire, but shows a close race. For North Carolina from back in July, it showed Buttigieg in first there, with Harris in second place and Newsom in third. Now for Ohio, in the Emerson poll, it showed Gavin Newsom winning the state of Ohio, with Pete Buttigieg in second place at 15.3. Texas from back in earlier August, Pete Buttigieg finished first with 21.6, and Newsom in second with 19.5. So the national polls in Florida, the only state I haven't mentioned, showed Buttigieg in first with 23 and Newsom around 12% from back in June. So the national polls, we've seen an update here, and obviously Gavin Newsom's really in California. The national polls have shown a competitive race where Gavin Newsom has been surging in support and is now even in second or even first place, depending on the poll you're looking at and the polling average. So Newsom has certainly been surging. But now we see in the First in the Nation poll as well that Buttigieg and Newsom are tied. Now this is very important to mention because back in 2020, Pete Buttigieg had a lot of grassroots support in the state of New Hampshire and essentially had a surging campaign in Iowa and New Hampshire, the two first contests from 2020. So Buttigieg starting out in first place or tied for first place in New Hampshire for 2028 really does not come as much of a surprise for me. I kind of expect that he will after his strong showing from 2020. But Gavin Newsom starting out at 23% is very significant and I think plays into the overall greater trend for the Democrats for 2028 right now, which is that Democrats, the primary is wide open. They're looking for someone that's going to fight not only for the Democrats, but fight against President Trump. And Gavin Newsom, for the last month or so, has been very vocal on social media and on TV, going after President Trump and the Trump administration, and that seems to be rewarding him in these early Democratic polls. Where a state like New Hampshire, almost about as far away you can get geographically from a state like California, Newsom is now tied for first place with Buttigieg. Now, there's still 12% undecided, and obviously we're in the fall summer fall of 2025. Going to be a long time before the Democratic primaries for 2028 take place. But it's interesting to see this poll out of New Hampshire, out of the Granite State, that confirms the national trends, which is that Gavin Newsom is surging in a lot of these polls. It's also significant to show that Vice President Kamala Harris, who just back in November won the state of New Hampshire over Donald Trump by about 3 points, is polling in fourth place at 6% of the vote. So nationally, as we see in the polling aggregates, Kamala Harris still barely leading the race to the White House average at 19%. In the most recent Yahoo YouGov poll, she's at 19%. We're starting to see her numbers slowly slip away as more time goes on. In a state like New Hampshire, it shows her numbers have fallen a lot further, down to 6%. Whereas in other states, like back in July, she's still polling in the top 3 in North Carolina. Ohio, she's polling around that 6% margin. In Texas, she's polling in the top 3 as well. So it's very interesting to see what overall is going on. As for the general election polls, there haven't been too many so far, but one from YouGov and Yahoo showed Newsom leading J.D. Vance 49-41 in the hypothetical matchup. Another from Ledger 360, which is a pollster I'm not too familiar with, to be completely honest, has Newsom leading Rubio 49-44 and 47-46 over J.D. Vance. So that's 2 polls in a row now that show Gavin Newsom narrowly ahead of J.D. Vance, or ahead by a decent amount in the YouGov Yahoo poll, while the rest of them thus far have shown J.D. Vance leading over Gavin Newsom. So again, there's not really too much to react or overreact to here, as we're still very early on in the process of 2028. President Trump just won in 2024. We're in August or September now of 2025. But we're starting to see some interesting developments in this 2028 Democratic primary, which is that Gavin Newsom has been surging nationwide, and in the first primary in caucus states like New Hampshire and maybe potentially in Iowa, we're starting to see Gavin Newsom start to surge there as well. As for the overall New Hampshire presidential primary, this is going to be a very interesting one to watch when it does happen, as Pete Buttigieg does have a lot of support here, and this should be one of his strongest states in terms of the presidential primary, that in Iowa. So if Buttigieg loses New Hampshire to Newsom in 2028, that could potentially be a sign that Pete Buttigieg is in for a much tougher fight, and Newsom may be winning this 2028 Democratic primary. But again, very early on, don't want to get ahead of myself or ahead of the process or anything for 2028, but this poll is very interesting in showing that Gavin Newsom, at very least, is now tied for the Democrats in the Granite State in New Hampshire for the 2028 presidential primary. And in that St. Anselm poll, it also had some other polls as well from local races in New Hampshire, like the congressional districts, and I do believe the Senate race as well. I'll be doing other videos on that probably in the future, but for this video, this is what came out of the 2028 presidential race. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you did, leave a comment below. Tell me your thoughts. I hope to see you in a future video.